Joanna Brooks is the author of Book of Mormon Girl, Stories from an American Faith. Now, we brought her in as a counterpoint to Pastor Robert Jeffress, who, as you said, has some pretty pointed things to say about Mormonism. But before we do that, this isn't a surrogate of the Romney campaign. I want you to understand who she is. In one of her pieces, she writes, "Am I voting for Mitt Romney? No. I'm a stone-cold Mormon Democrat. I'm such a Democrat that I've already gotten two Christmas cards from the Obama White House. The unfortunate thing about her terrible politics is that she's a fantastic writer." Why is that always the case? Joanna, glad to have you, dear.
Thank you for having me.
Your politics are all jacked to hell, but man, oh man, can you string together a lyrical line?
Well, thank you.
I think that's the devil speaking through you, Joanna. The devil, I say. Cast out them demons. Let's get to it because
I think that's just what Pastor Jeffress said, too.
Yeah, you know what? I want to just take you to task for this because this is stuff that people need to know that's going on off air. Robert Jeffress is out pimping this book. He said the name of his book 31 times during the course of our interview. And he's like a big deal. You either love him or hate him, but he's on national TV. And here you are, Miss Fancy Pants. You have to take your kids somewhere in a couple minutes, and you can only do one segment with me? What's up with it? Is that what Mormons do to people?
Yeah, we raised families. We had a lot of kids, so we got to look after them. But, I'm sure Pastor Jeffress is you're right. He is a very respected Christian leader, and I acknowledge the service that he's given his community, and that matters.
Really?
Yeah.
That was total bull, and you know it. Now, remember, we're on radio. We're on radio, not the written form. I've seen some of the stuff you say. Let's get to it.
Well,
you answer one of the... I know you are. You are Mormons Christians?
Here's the thing. Folks who are Baptists, Methodists will have theological differences with Mormons, and they do not view us as part of the historic Christian family. The roots of the Mormon tradition are right in Protestantism in the 19th century. There are doctrines we hold that are different than mainline Christians, but we consider ourselves Christians because we view Jesus Christ as our Savior. So I respect people who want to say, you're not the same kind of Christian I am, but, I will counter with, I was raised to love Jesus Christ, and that's been a guiding force in my whole life, even as a Democrat.
Do you believe he's the Son of God?
Yes.
Do you believe he died for our sins?
Yes.
Okay, then what's up with Brigham Young and Joseph Smith?
Yeah, we scratch our heads and ask ourselves that sometimes, too.
You named a university after him, Joanna. Come on now.
Well,
it's in some no-namer.
I didn't personally name the university, but, Brigham Young was a very powerful and commanding 19th century leader. When he took, the reins of the Mormon church, we were sort of a persecuted lot in the Midwest, a lot of mob violence. And, he led us across the plains. It takes decisive leadership. Look, in Texas, you should be able to appreciate decisive leadership. That's a trait Texans admire. It took some decisive leadership for him to cross the plains and start up a whole, new Mormon settlement, as it were, in the American West and organize all those people coming from Europe to join the faith. So, he was a commanding leader. Now, he had character traits that don't play well in 21st century America. And he had behaviors, too. I mean, he was a polygamist, straight up. So, I scratched my head over that, too. Not a fan of polygamy.
Joanna Brooks, the book is called Book of Mormon Girl, Stories from an American Faith. I say that so you won't keep doing it like Jeffress did. Let me ask you, if you read Arthur Conan Doyle's very first Sherlock Holmes book, and I don't know if you have, it's called A Study in Scarlet. Yep. It's a story about the Mormon, a group of Mormon, the original group of Mormons, and how they wouldn't let this guy out of the Mormon faith because they had rescued him out in the desert. I've received a lot of emails from people. And I admittedly, I don't know that much about Mormonism. I've never met a Mormon that wasn't first class, nice people. They seem to share my political values, unlike you. And they seem to be solid, God-fearing, Christian, decent people in that sense. But let me ask you, a lot of people who left the Mormon faith told stories, and I guess they're all lying, but I've never had people. It was like leaving Koresh's group or something. Now, where's this coming from?
We've been an insular community for a long time. we were isolated in the American West for 50, 80 years. And even now, Mormons are most likely to marry within the faith and associate within the faith. A lot of Mormons feel like the world doesn't understand us. So there's a really strong sense of in-group pull and belonging. And yeah, people who leave the faith can experience some rejection from their families. And I hate that aspect of my culture.
Why do you think that is?
Part of who we are.
Do you think that's doctrinal, or it's more sort of cultural?
I mean, there is a sense in which many Mormons are literal believers and who believe like we have the truth, So it's almost as if, a Christian a Christian believes that he or she should not associate with unbelievers. So sometimes Mormon people who leave the faith, their families no longer want to associate them for that kind of reason if they're very Orthodox, literal believing people. So, there's that. And I think there's also awkwardness and fear and all those human emotions. What happens when someone rejects something that means a lot to you? Granted, there are families and people in the church who can be cold and harsh and rejecting, and that's, again, not something I'm proud of. It is a part of our experience. There's a need for more understanding and compassion in our community.
But you do understand that whether it's fair or not, and whether it's a cruel term or not, when you hear the term cult, which a number of people after my first Jeffress interview, a number of people said, hey, Michael, you don't realize, what this thing is. And they very often use the term cult. Right. And I guess, I'm not holding you account for that. But
no, I left. Maybe my experience will help. I left the church and stopped attending for 7 or 8 years when I was in my 20s. And no one
at Southern Baptists call that backsliders.
Yes.
That's called backsliding. See, here's what's unfortunate here, Joanna, because you're too important for us. Book of Mormon Girl, Stories from an American Faith, is we have to go to a break. And if you stayed with me for one more segment, you could have answered this great question, which you did in one of your pieces a couple of weeks ago. What do Mormons believe about African Americans? That's out there. But unfortunately, our audience is going to be left to believe that Mormons hate black people because you couldn't stay around to answer that question.
Because I got to take my kids to school. Okay.
Okay, but here's the deal. You start driving, and we'll do it on your cell phone. Are you on your cell phone right now?
I walk them.
I
walk them.
Oh, that's awesome.
Can you hang on?
Is that what Mormon people do? They walk their kids to school? Because I can be for that.
We like to take care of our little ones.
All right, hold on. All right, do Mormons dislike everybody black but Gladys Knight? Let me read you the opening line of a piece you wrote called "What Do Mormons Believe About African Americans?" And you say, "There is no question that the LDS Church has a racist past. Just like the U.S. of A., and there is no question in my mind that racism does not fade easily." That was a nod to your little leftist buddies that you go have cocktails with. You had to admit that. But then you say, whether from Mormonism or from American culture at large. But there are many African-American Mormons and their allies who work hard to address it to get a sense of their lives, And then you say it's impossible to generalize how black people are treated by Mormons, but then you go on to say, and I quote, "I don't have anything against black people. Some of my best friends are black people."
No, I did not say that.
Why did you say that? Because that's what racists say.
I did not say that.
All right. Well, what is the truth? Because that's one of the things that's come out.
Well, it's an important question. It's a very important question. A little history lesson. When the church started in the 1830s back east, African-American men were ordained. Our priesthood involves everybody. It's not just like pastors. We have a lay priesthood. So all men of a certain age are ordained to the priesthood and are expected to serve the community, serve the congregations. And so in the early years of the church, African men were ordained, and then something happened.
But what if they were Caribbean? What if they weren't African American? They were just black. How were they treated?
Oh no, anyone of African descent was ordained in the early days of the church, and anyone also American, whoever joined was cool. Right. And then, something happened in the late 1840s, and even historians who study Mormon history aren't clear exactly what it was. But, under the leadership of Brigham Young, and especially as we moved out into Utah and basically isolated ourselves, and even when black pioneers crossed the plains with the Mormon people, under the leadership of Brigham Young, a philosophy evolved that black people should not receive the priesthood, should not be ordained to have equal status in the community. And there were individual black folks who were ordained in the church until the 1880s, 90s, but, a ban settled into place in the early 20th century, and people came up with a lot of reasons, just like people came up with a lot of reasons from the Bible to legitimate slavery back in the day, about Cain and Ham and different marks God put on different people. I mean, in my view, it was all foolishness. None of it was true or solid, and yet it took us a while, being as isolated as we were, and as homogenous as we then became in the 20th century, to kind of confront the fact that the priesthood ban is a bad thing, is wrong. And it wasn't until 1978, when I was 7 years old, that the priesthood ban was lifted, and all people have full status in the church today. And there are black people in my congregation. I attend every Sunday. I teach black kids in my Sunday school class.
What percentage? Like what percentage?
Oh, not a high percentage of the.
If you don't have the number in the racist guide is if you don't have 14% black membership, then you're officially racist. So
that's right.
I mean, Lakewood has like 30%.
Yeah. Well,
you know who Joel Osteen is?
Oh, sure.
And then and they not only don't hate black people, they don't hate Hispanics, even Hispanics that speak Spanish, because after the English service, he has a Mexican guy who comes in and gives a sermon in Spanish. So they like everybody. Do y'all?
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, we've always proselytized and ordained Latino folks, Spanish-speaking folks. I mean, worldwide, only half the church is white and lives in the U.S.
What about dwarfs? Do y'all have any dwarfs?
You know what? I think Billy Barty was Mormon.
Who?
Remember the famous? Yeah, do you know Billy Barty, the famous dwarf from the 1970s and 80s?
No, that's creepy that you're up on your dwarf, on your famous dwarfs. That's weird, Johnny.
I'm just up on my famous Mormons. That's all.
Let me ask you a question. She's Joanna Brooks, the author of Book of Mormon Girl, Stories from an American Faith. Religion Dispatches. Hold on one second. I can't get my screen. Okay. Religion Dispatches pushes lie that Mormon made anti-gay remarks. You've taken on the issue as to whether Mormons and the Mormon faith is anti-gay. On behalf of Anderson Cooper and that whole group of leftists who ask every Republican, are you gay, since you're a liberal Democrat, or are you anti-gay? Is the Mormon church anti-gay?
The church has taken and takes consistently a strong stance against civil same-sex marriage rights. And in California 4 years ago, the church organized members to donate very, very large sums of money to a campaign to ban same-sex marriage.
Stop trying to help Mormons win races in Republican primaries because you know you're a liberal Democrat. Now, let me ask you this, Joanna. So Mitt Romney's pro-gay rights position is contradictory to the Mormon Church's position. Would that be correct?
Does he have a pro-gay rights position?
He's been very pro-gay rights. You see?
People on the left don't view him that way. We don't speak.
Really? Have you ever checked his record?
Well, back as governor of Massachusetts, we know he was a very pragmatic moderate. But, the story he's been telling this time around.
A pragmatic moderate? Could you do me a favor, Joanna? Could you go out and introduce Mitt Romney on the stump in South Carolina and throughout the South and say, I'm Joanna Brooks. I'm what you would call an extreme, flaming, liberal, leftist Democrat. But I'm for Mitt Romney because he's what I would call a pragmatic moderate. If you would just introduce him that way, my work would be done.
I can't do it anymore because he's not a pragmatic moderate anymore. Flaming liberals like me liked him when he was in Massachusetts. Now he's, But, I don't see him as being pro-gay rights.
Anything about the Mormon Church bother you?
Oh, sure, all the time, just like family. Anything about your family bothers you?
Well, how much time do you have? But are there doctrines that people criticize the church for that you say I have a real problem with that? I agree with that criticism. That's a fair criticism.
Oh, sure. I believe differently. I am not a supporter. I respect.
You're stammering, Joanna. Go ahead.
Well, I'm trying to find the polite way to say it because, it's important to be respectful of your faith and of the majority of its believers. I go a different way on gay rights. I go a different way on the status of women in the church.
You don't think women are treated well in the church?
No, I wouldn't say we're not treated well. I'd say that, just as much baggage as we've collected over the years about race, Mormons have very conservative views on gender that could use some examination.
Like what?
Yep. You'll have to come on Sunday to know. And if you do, see, luring you in. No, I mean, women do not lead in our congregations.
Well, let me ask you this, Joanna. Since your husband already took the kids to school, I do have some serious questions to ask you. Can you hold with me for a minute?
Yeah.
Well, I'll peddle your book. I'll buy 10 copies. She's Joanna Brooks, and the book is called Book of Mormon Girl, Stories from an American Faith. We'll talk about that faith, Mormonism, coming up.